Welcome to 30-Minute Apps and More. This is Episode 8, Create Applications with App Engine Studio. Welcome everyone, my name is Kelly Bridgeman, and today we're going to look at creating applications using the App Engine Studio as well as Studio IDE. The application is called Riddick, that stands for Risk, Issue, Decision, and Action Items. The purpose of the video is to demonstrate how to create a simple business application on the ServiceNow platform. The application will be a business tool to track active citizen developer project concerns. Now, the citizen developer project was a previous application built for business units to request the creation of a business-related application in ServiceNow that solves a current business problem or limitation. The specifications of the project are to track current or potential risks, issues, and decisions for active citizen developer projects. The application should allow users to retain and manage solution options and action items, including task assignments. And the application should be accessible through the ServiceNow Workspace. The audience for this application is the Atlas Zero delegated developers. Let's take a second and talk about the application process. The application team will create the risk, issue, or decision based on any concerns or developments for active citizen developer projects. On a regular basis, the Riddick group will meet, which includes the application team, managers, and users, and they will review any open risk, issue, or decisions and also discuss options. The options will then be entered into the system using the related lists, as well as any action items and the assignment of those tasks. Our application will contain 3 tables. The primary table will be called Riddick, and the 2 related tables will be called options and action items. Now, these tables will be extended from the task table, and 2 of the tables will have custom fields added as well. Let's talk a little bit about extending a table. When you extend a table, the fields from the table that is extended are copied to the table that you're creating. So in this case, there'll be 70 plus fields that will be copied to our new tables. We will also add additional fields to the tables as needed. And let's keep in mind that many of the key applications within ServiceNow, such as the incident, change, and problems, all extend the task table. And finally, we'll add some customizations to the application. We'll start with the Workspace list user access. We'll remove the listings for both the options and the action items tables, as those will not be needed due to our related lists. We'll then add the related list to the Riddick form, so the options and action items point back to the parent risk, issue, or decision. We'll customize the form design by adding or removing fields, adding new sections, as well as a activities formatter. We will also customize the list layout for both the table-related lists as well as the table column headers. Okay, let's go ahead and get started creating our application. Now, if you watched the last episode, you saw that we created this application using the Studio IDE. This time we're going to actually create the application using the App Engine Studio. And one main benefit of this is that you can create a workspace for your application very easily. So we'll go ahead and type in Studio in the navigator, and we'll see that we have the App Engine Studio. This is going to open up the App Engine Studio interface, and if we had any applications, we would see them in a list right here. And now, one thing to note is that you can use some existing templates if they meet the needs of what you're looking for. In this case, we're actually going to create our own application. So we're going to click Create App. We're going to give it a name and a description. We're going to click Continue. And what this is doing is it's creating a shell for our application, and we can add accordingly. We can add data to this application in the form of tables. We can add a portal or a workspace. Some automation workflows can be added, and also additional security. Now, I have found that there's a limitation to adding the database tables here in App Engine Studio, and that is on the forms, there are no default fields listed. So we're going to jump back into actual Studio IDE, and we're going to create those tables. So right here, we'll select the application we just created called Riddick, and we're going to go up and select Create Application File. We'll leave Data Model selected as well as Table, and we'll click Create. We're going to go ahead and put in our table name. Now, as we talked about earlier, these tables are going to extend the task table, so they will have the fields from the task table copied over. Okay, we're also going to select auto number here, so we can get a unique identifier. We'll leave the prefix as set. Under application access, we're going to actually select some of the other options, and we'll click create. This is going to go ahead and generate our table with all of the settings that and we now see that the table is created, and we'll go ahead and create our other two tables. So again, data model table, we'll click create. This one is going to be called options. Again, it is going to extend the task table. We'll select auto number, and we'll leave the defaults, and we'll give ourselves some additional capabilities. We'll click submit, and our second table will be created. And remember, we're going to add some custom fields, but we're going to add those using App Engine Studio. So let's go ahead and create the third table here. Again, data model, table, and create. We're going to add in action items. Again, this will extend the task table. We'll select our additional properties and auto number as well, and we'll leave the defaults. So we'll go ahead and submit that, and that will create our third table. There we go. Okay, now that we've got our three tables created, we're going to actually go in and add some of our custom fields. Now, I'm going to actually do this from the App Engine Studio because I like the interface better. So we're going to switch over to App Engine Studio. We're going to select the Riddick table. I'm going to add 4 fields here. And again, like I said, the reason that I wanted to do it from this interface is because I like the method of doing this. It's much easier, several less steps. So we'll go ahead and add in Riddick type, which is going to be a choice field. And then here's the thing I like about it is you can add the choices directly in this view rather than going back in each time to add a new option. So we're going to add the option here, risk, issue, or decision, and we're done. We'll add another field called impact type. Again, this is a choice field, and we'll add in the options of scope. You know, this is basically just a field to identify where the risk, issue, or decision has been, what area it's going to affect. going to put in quality and architecture. We have 2 more fields to add here. First being business impact. And this is going to be a string field. And we'll give it some length. And our last one is going to be due date reason. This again is going to be a string field, and we'll increase the size. So that's it. We've got our 4 additional custom fields added. We'll go ahead and click Save. And then we'll do the same thing to the options table. There we go. Now we'll go back and open up the options table. And here we're going to add 3 fields, pros, cons, and recommendation. So these are going to, first 2 are going to be choice fields again. And we'll add in our options. This is going to be similar to the impact type options. Now you could actually do this a little differently. You could create a table and add in the fields to the table and then do a lookup on the table itself. That's one way of doing it. It would save you having to put these in multiple times, but it's fairly quick to be able to add them in. So we're just going to go ahead and do them that way. Okay, so the last field that we're going to add in here is called recommendation, and this is going to be a string field, and again we'll give it some size. All right, that's the 3 additional fields we're going to add to the options table. We'll go ahead and click Save, and it will add these custom fields. Now, we didn't have any fields that we're going to be adding to the action items. So as far as data is concerned, we've added the 3 tables and we've added the additional custom fields that we need on the Riddick and the options table. All right, so now let's get into some of our customizations. The first thing we're going to do is customize the form views for our tables. Now, we won't do that here in App Engine Studio. We're going to do that back in the Studio IDE. Okay, so this is what Studio looked like when I last left it. I'm going to go ahead and close these tabs so you can see just how we get into modifying the form views. So up underneath tables, we'll see that we've got our 3 tables listed. I'm going to go ahead and select the Riddick table. And I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to show you what this looks like as the default columns or fields that are displayed. And you can get into the form designer one of several ways. I'm going to go ahead and click on the context menu and click Configure Form Design. Now that's going to open up the form designer for the Riddick form. And you can see we've got the default fields showing here. Now each field that is displayed can be in a section of its own, and it can be a 1 or 2 column section. So right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple of the fields that we added in, our custom fields. The first being Riddick type. I'm going to go ahead and add this up top since that's a very important field. Then I'm going to add a couple more. We added impact type. We added business impact. And lastly, we added due date reason. So I'm going to add due date reason as well as due date. Okay, so now I've got all the fields on the form that I want. Now I'm going to arrange them a bit differently. So one thing about sections is you can see this section does not have a column header or a section header. And what that's going to do is it's not going to display as its own section. The reason that this was there is because there's a column width change. This top one was 2 columns and this was 1 column. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple sections here. And you can do that by clicking on the plus icon in the one of the sections. And the first thing I'm going to do is give this a name. And we're going to call this impact. It is set to be a 2-column section. I'm going to make that 1 column. And then I'm going to simply drag and drop the fields. So if you click on the left portion of a field, you can see I can pull that and bring that down. Business impact, I'm going to bring down as well. And then I'm also going to add in due date and due date reason. Okay, I'm going to add one more section here. I'm going to call this notes. And I'm going to bring down my work notes. I'm also going to add in the activity formatter. And you'll see a bit later how this is displayed. Basically, it's going to show any activity on the record. So I'm going to make this a 1-column section. And there we go. I think we've got everything in order as we want it. Now, another thing to note is once you add fields in here, you can manipulate the field by clicking on the gear icon or the settings for that field. And you can set the field to mandatory, read only. You can give it a default value. You can manipulate the choices that go along with this field. You can also remove the field. This simply removes the field from the form. It does not delete the field itself. You can also remove a section by clicking on the X to the right side of each section. Okay, I think we've got this how we want it. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then I'm going to go back to Studio and I'm going to reload this form. And we'll see now that we've got our additional fields added. We can see Riddick type here. We can also see the sections that we created for impact and notes. Okay, and note here you don't see the activity formatter until the actual record is created. One other thing to note is these are displayed as tabs. They can be displayed as individual sections, and that would be done in the settings in forms. You have a tabbed version, or you can basically turn that on or off. So now if we reload this form, we'll see that these are now sections. They can be collapsed and or opened, but I prefer the tabbed version. So we're going to go back here and turn this back on. Come back and reload the form, and we can see we've now got them in tabs. And this takes care of all of the design changes we wanted to make to the Riddick table or Riddick form. So now we're going to go ahead and make our design changes to the options table. I'm going to go ahead and click on options. And if we scroll down, here's a second way to get into the form designer. Before we went into the form and then clicked on the context menu to see the form. This time we're going to click on design form, and that's going to open up the form designer, this time for the options table. So we are going to add in the custom fields that we we added earlier. We're going to add those to our form. So I'm going to just bring and drag those over. Those and recommendation. I'm going to also bring over the due date. So now you can remove any fields that you don't want. You can move fields around if need be. We're going to go ahead and add 2 sections again. We're going to call the first one notes. We're going to drag down the work notes. I'm going to make the section a 1-column section. Okay, I'm going to add one more section here. Oops, and I just deleted it. There's a nice little feature right there. I clicked the wrong button and I removed a section, but then you do have the undo button at the top, so you can bring that right back. But we'll go ahead and create another section. And we're going to call this review. And we're going to bring down our pros and our cons and our recommendation. I'm going to make this column or this section a 1-column section as well. And finally, I'm going to add the activities formatter to the notes section. Now, one other field that I added here, I had a specific section. The due date was in the impact section before. We're just going to go ahead and bring and drag that up into the top section. Okay, we'll go ahead and click Save. And we'll come back to Studio to take a look at our form. So now again, we can see due date added up in the top section. We've got our 2 tabs for review and notes. Okay, those are all the changes we wanted to make to our forms. And again, those are done through the Form Designer. Before we get into the next set of customizations, which would be configuring the list or column headers that are displayed, we're going to go ahead and generate the workspace. This will allow us to view the list display in the workspace view. So to do that, we're going to go back to App Engine Studio. And note, we just made some changes to both forms on the Riddick and options, and we can now see that we have entries here under the Experience section. So under this same section, we're going to click on the plus button or the add. You can see that you can create a portal, you can create a mobile view, or you can create a workspace. We're going to go ahead and create a workspace. Now, you can give this a different name than you named your application. We're going to go ahead and leave that as is. You can add a description if you like. You can change the URL of your workspace and add any roles that you want included for access to your workspace. Now we're just going to go ahead and leave the 3 user roles that were created, and we're going to click continue. I'm going to switch these tables out and set our primary table to the Riddick table, and then also add in the action items table as well as the options table as our secondary tables. I'll go ahead and click continue. It just takes a couple seconds here, and it's going to generate the different components that's needed to create the workspace. And you can see now we've got an entry under the experience, which is our workspace. We'll go ahead and click preview. Now this workspace is going to open up with the default dashboard that is generated when you create a workspace. We're not going to take a look at customizing or configuring this dashboard at this time. This will be done in the next video, episode 9, where we will take a look at how we can customize this to our needs. But for now, we're going to take a look at the listing within the workspace. If we click on the icon on the left here, list, you can see it will bring up the list of options that we have. We've got 3 modules here, that one for each of the tables that we created, action items, options, and Riddick, as well as 4 menu items below each of those modules. Now, for the purposes of this application, we're not necessarily going to need the action item or option modules. So we're going to show how we can go in and modify this listing to remove those items. To do that, we're going to go back to the App Engine Studio, and we're going to go ahead and click on the Riddick Workspace. When I do that, you can see it's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to display the Workspace editor. When the editor opens, it displays the dashboard or the home page for this workspace. Now, just to give you an idea of how this is set up, on the left-hand side, you can see under the label page here, we have multiple options. This is where you can select each of the different components within your workspace and configure or customize them to your needs. So we're going to take a look at the listing. So if we click list, we'll see that this opens up in the main window, and we'll see our listing in the left portion of that. If we click on that, you can see that changes the right hand pane and displays different options. So we're going to go ahead down and click on the configuration link, and that will open up a view of the UX list menu configurations. And under here we see the Riddick menu config. We're going to go ahead and click on that. This is where all of the modules inside the listings are located. Now we can see that we've got the 3 modules that we referred to earlier. We're simply going to go ahead and modify this setting to set the active field to false. Now what that's going to do is not display those items within the workspace list. So if we go back to our workspace and we refresh, we can see that the list has now been updated, and we no longer have all 3 modules. We only have the Riddick module. The other 2 options and action items are no longer displayed. Now, we didn't delete them. We simply just set the active field to false. So if we ever want to have them back in the list, we can just simply go in and reset the active field to true. Next, we're going to take a look at how we can customize the column headers that are displayed. You can see that each of these are a different listing: open, unassigned, closed, and all. Each of them has a separate list of columns to display. So now we're going to take a look at how we can customize that. We're going to go back into our UX list menu configuration, and we're going to go into the Riddick module, and from there we can see the 4 menu items. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the open. So if we click on open, this should open up the listing for the open items list. Now we can see that at the bottom we've got a section here labeled columns. If we click on the lock and open that up, we can see that here are the 6 column headers listed. If we go back and look at our workspace list, we can see that they match up to the ones displayed here. So we're going to go ahead and remove a couple of them. Task type isn't needed at this point. Assign to is not needed as well. Priority. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a couple in. If you remember, Riddick type was one of the additional columns that we added, as well as impact type. So I'm going to go ahead and add that one as well. Now, you can modify the order in which these are listed. So we're going to go ahead and move the short description up. So we'll have short description state, Riddick type, and impact type. We'll go ahead and update that, and we'll go back to our workspace. Anytime you make a change there, you cannot simply just click on a different listing. You've got to actually refresh the workspace. So now we see the open list of Riddicks, and we see that the order is as we set it. So So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for these other three menu items, and they're simply done the same way. So we're going to go ahead and click unassigned. We're going to go into the columns. We're going to remove a couple of the fields. We moved up the short description, and then we're going to add the Riddick type and the impact type. We're going to update that. And we'll do the same thing to the other ones as well. So for the closed list, we'll remove the items we don't need. And we'll add the two additionals. And we'll move up short description and update. Now for the last one, we'll go in and do the same thing. We'll remove the ones not needed, and we will add the two fields that we would like to see. And lastly, move up short description and update. Once we come back to the workspace and we refresh, we will now see that the other listings for unassigned, closed, and all are displaying the correct column headers. Now you can have different column headers displayed. For instance, for the closed, we can have the closed by field and things of that nature. So whatever your needs are, those can be customized. We have two more customizations that we're going to look at today. The first is adding the related list to the Riddick form, and the second would be the column headers within the options and action items. So before we can look at the related list within the Riddick form, we actually have to add a Riddick record. So we're going to go over here to New, and this is going to bring up the form. And keep in mind that we updated the form to show the Riddick type and the impact type, due date, business impact, due date reason, and the notes. We'll add our first Riddick here, and it will be of type risk. We're going to make this database connection to legacy system. That'll be our first risk that we have. And the impact type here is going to affect the scope of the project. We're going to give it a due date of the end of next week. Business impact, it could affect the scope with respect to new development. And due date reason is we need a decision ASAP. We're going to go ahead and click save. I'm going to go ahead and move some of these panes over a little bit so we see the majority of our data here. So we can see that we've got our first record in there. And if I jump back into the list, I'll go ahead and close this one. We now see that we have our first record in. It's a type risk. It could impact the scope, and the short description is the DB connection to the legacy system. So we can go ahead and click on that and come into the actual record. Now this is where the related lists come into play. So for each Riddick or risk, issue, or decision that's in the system, depending on what that issue or risk is, we're going to want to provide some options to resolve our issue or risk, as well as some action items. So in order to do that, we're going to actually create related lists that will be on this Riddick form itself. That means those options or action items will be directly related to this risk or issue or decision. And the way that we're going to accomplish that is going back to the studio. So we're going to jump back in the studio, and we're going to click on the Riddick form itself, and we're going to open up the form. And from the form, I'm going to click on the context menu and click Configure Related Lists. From there, it's going to open up a related list for the Riddick form, and we're simply going to select the two tables that we created. That's going to be action items, and you'll see two options here. We are going to want to select the parent option. This way it creates a parent relationship between the action items and Riddick table. And the other one would be the options, parent. Now I'm going to adjust the order of these, and I'm going to click Save. Once I do that, I'm going to come back to my Riddick form, and I'm going to refresh this page. And when I do that, you'll see that there's two additional tabs now on the Riddick form labeled Options and Action Items. So, as I said before, for every risk, issue, or decision, we can have some options and action items. So let's go ahead and add a couple of them. Once we click on it, we'll see that it opens up the options related list. And this listing here of column headers, we're going to actually customize this listing next. But first, let's go ahead and put in some options for this risk. See, we're going to import data from a spreadsheet. So if you remember correctly, our risk was that we had a possible issue with the database connection to the legacy system. So one option that we might have is to import the data from a spreadsheet with the legacy data. Pros to that are it shouldn't affect our schedule. It may in fact affect the scope of the project. The recommendation here, this could be something like this would be the quickest solution. And we'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so we've added our first option. We'll go ahead and close that and go back to this view. Again, don't worry about this display right now. We're going to fix that in a moment. And we're going to add a second option. And that second option is going to be to create a table with the legacy data within our system that is automatically updated. The pros and the cons to this, again, would affect our schedule, and the cons is it could change our scope a little bit. We're going to go ahead and save that as well. When we come back here and refresh, we've got a couple options in there, and now we want to add some action items. So we're going to go ahead and click New. And then if you remember, our first option was to import the data from a spreadsheet with the legacy data in it. We're going to actually add in action item for that to confirm the database connection is attainable. Or not. And we're going to set a due date of Tuesday. We're going to go ahead and assign that. And we're going to click, and then we're going to add our second action item for our second option, which was to create a table. And so we're going to research the import and update scenario for that option. So we're going to click New. We're going to assign that. And give it a due date of Tuesday as well. And go ahead and save. We'll go ahead and close this. So now from our original entry, we can see that we have 2 options and 2 action items. Okay, so now that we've got the related lists in place, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can configure the options and action items list column headers. So we're going to go back into Studio, and we are going to go into our options table. We're going to go into the list view, and we are going to configure the list layout. So again, we're going to remove a couple fields that are at this point, and we are going to add in the pros and cons and the recommendation, and save. Once we do that, we'll go back to our workspace and refresh. We'll go into our options, and now we see our new list of column headers that gives some of the data that we would be looking for. So we're going to do the same for action items. I'm going to click on the action items table. Here we're going to say show list. We're going to click on the context menu and go down to configure list layout. Again, we will remove fields that are not needed, and we will add due date. Okay, we'll go back to the workspace, and once if we go into the action items, now we see again the column headers that we set. So let's go ahead and run back through this one more time and show you how the application works. So from the list view within our workspace, we can add a new risk, issue, or decision. This time we'll go ahead and add an issue, and that issue being that the dev team delays due to schedule overlap. This could impact the schedule. We're going to give it a due date. Need to know within next 2 weeks. And we'll click save. Once we've done that, we've got the issue in the system. Now we'll go ahead and add some options. In the case of our application, the team would meet and discuss any options, and then those options would be added into the system. So in this case, we're going to add an option to adjust the schedule. And we didn't set any the first time through, but we'll go ahead and add some pros here is that it won't affect the schedule, could affect the scope of the project. Since we could reduce that time to make it a little quicker, we may have to remove some things from this milestone or deadline. So I'll go ahead and save that. You can see we've got our first option here. I'm going to go ahead and add a second option, and that option is going to be to consider bringing on a consultant. Now this could affect, could positively affect the schedule, but could negatively affect the budget. I'll go ahead and save that. And if we refresh, we should see both of our options here. Okay, now let's add some action items. Based on the options that we have, we'll go ahead and add new. And the first one, if we do adjust the schedule, we've got to get approval from the board. And lastly, the second action item, based on our second option of considering acquiring a consultant, let's see, we're going to need to know what that's going to cost. So let's see if we can research the consultant availability and costs. And we will save that. So we can see from our second Riddick or issue put in, dev team delays due to scheduling overlap. We've got two options to adjust the schedule or consider bringing on a consultant, and two action items of getting approval from the board to update the schedule, and the second one would be to research consultant availability and costs. Okay, that's all we have for today. I want to thank you for watching my video. Again, my name is Kelly Bridgeman, and you've been watching 30-Minute Apps and More. This has been episode 8, Creating Applications with the App Engine Studio. Stay tuned for my next video, which will be episode 9, in which I'll demonstrate how to configure the dashboard in the Workspace. Thank you very much.